Hi, everybody. I'm Sonia with Girl Powerful, and today I am blessed to have Carla Hernandez with us. She is the Women and Girls Program Manager with the Department of Child and Family Services in LA. And we are starting to work with the youth that Carla works with. And I wanted to come on here and have an important conversation around women and girls, and one, how a mentor can change the path of your life in a positive way, and also the work that we're going to be doing this spring, summer with the girls. So, Carla, welcome.
Thank you, Sonia. You're amazing, amazing organization. It's great to be working with you and be going down this road together. And thank you for just accommodating my multiple requests. And for those of you who may not know, we have been communicating for over a year now, and this is where we are. So it's amazing to be here at this point.
I know we've been wanting to work together, and Carla's been our biggest cheerleader, like checking in, being like, we can do it. We can finally like work something out. So I'm really, really grateful to have you here. So I wanted to go back because the first time we talked to one another, you shared your personal story about mentorship. So will you tell everybody like about your mentor?
Sure. I've been relatively lucky over the years. There have been people that have walked in and also out of my life who have shared a nugget or provided a resource or had my help through something difficult, easy, whatever the case may be. So it developed in me a trust in trusting adults and even peers, but mostly trusting adults who I felt had my best interest in mind and wanted to see me pretty much exercise my potential or find potential where I didn't think any existed, and just keep reaching for the next rung. So when I was so for those of you who may not know, I went to a really, I know I'm going to sound very privileged, but a very elite boarding school on the East Coast that I had no clue existed. When I was young, when I was in grade school and in elementary school, I'm sorry, grade school and also in junior high school, I always thought that boarding school was a place where you sent the bad kids or kids that, needed military training because they were just so incorrigible at home. But when I was in the 8th grade, I was approached by a teacher who I didn't feel I was very close to, but it turns out we had so many things in common. And he was a male, very trusting male, but he approached me when I was in the 8th grade about this opportunity to apply to these elite boarding schools on the East Coast rather. And I was like, I'm from Los Angeles. So I was like, oh, come on. I have so many cool things going on. I'm in leadership, I'm in yearbook, a student council, the morale committee. I was doing so many things at that time. And so it just really didn't seem, it was something that I think met my interest at the time. So I probably brushed it off and I said, no, thank you. I'm not ready, which was fine. At that time. So then he approached me again in the 9th grade. And I should mention that he was my math teacher. And I always felt that I never was good at math. And even now, my husband and my kids laugh because they'll ask me a math question. And I was like, ask your dad because I really don't know. But you know what? I'm telling you that now because girls are just as good as boys, if not better, in math and science and the arts and anything. So don't let the fact that you're a girl don't set those limits for yourself. Like, had I had the right mentor, had I had the right tutor at the time, I would have excelled in math because, it makes sense when things make sense, right? You have to have the right tools and the right help. And maybe you're thinking about math in a way that is not conducive to you. But if somebody explains it to you and makes it relative to your world, then you might understand it. And the movie Stand and Deliver, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's an example of how a teacher in East Los Angeles was able to make it relatable to the kids. And those kids ended up doing exceptionally well on the aptitude tests. I forgot what they were called, but it did exceptionally well. So I think mentors are important in that sense because they make things relatable to us and they make goals that seem, like unreachable, reachable. And they also teach us about the tools and the steps and the preparedness that we have to undertake to get there. So that's my little, tangent. So his name was Mr. Mitchell. I'll never forget him. Mr. Mitchell came to me. He approached me again in the 9th grade. And this time again, and a year makes a big difference in the life of a youth, because your brain is constantly developing, and they say your brain doesn't stop developing till you're about 26 or something. So, honestly, in that year, I think I had matured a lot, and I had already done a lot of the cool extracurriculars that I had already been doing. So this time I actually get some true thought and deliberation. So he told me about it again. He mentioned this test called the PSAT, which is like the baby SAT. And again, I was like, oh, I'm gonna bomb that test because I don't do math very well. I've always loved science because I science to me just helps explain the world, and I love science. But for whatever reason, math, I handicapped myself because I couldn't do as well as anyone else. And looking back on it, if I could speak to my younger self, I would tell my younger self, don't give up, seek the resources that you need to get there. And then once you develop that confidence, there's just no telling where you can go. But anyway, so in the ninth grade, he approached me again. And this time I said, okay. And I went to my brother, who is another of my mentors. I mentioned earlier that I've been lucky that I've had people in and out of my life who have helped. So I was raised by a single mom, and I'm sorry, my story's a little off, but I was raised by a single mom. I don't know my dad. I couldn't pick him out of a lineup for you. No clue what he looks like, although I've been told that I look just like him. But my brother was my male role model. Again, trusting male in my life. He always did really well in school. He's one of the smartest men I know. He really cares about children and families and his community, and he's a big advocate for rights of others. And so my brother, I always trusted his guidance. If my brother said to do something, I would do it. And if he said not to, sometimes if I wanted to rebel, I'd do it anyway. But for the most part, I knew if big brother said no, then don't do it, because he's looking out for me. And that's another thing too. Sometimes people who love you and who really want the best for you, sometimes will say no. And sometimes that's not what you want to hear, but sometimes that's the right answer, because there's like some visibility that those of us in the situation may not always have, but people around you whom you trust and who trust you and who believe in you and want the best for you, they may not think that something you're about to engage in or do or set out on is the best thing for you. So listen to those people, and take time to stop and ask yourself, why do I want to do this? And what are the pros and the cons? Like, what could happen if I go to that dance that my brother doesn't want me to go to? Things like that. So always ask. So anyway, so my brother was the one who told me, his exact words were, "Are you stupid?" And he meant it in a loving way. Again, he's my older brother. He's like, "You should totally do it. You should totally apply." And I was like, "Really?" I thought he was gonna say, "That's weird. It's too far. Girls from East Los Angeles don't go to these schools in New Hampshire. Like, it's gonna cost too much money." I thought it was gonna be, but on the complete opposite. And that's actually, honestly, I'll be truthful. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted him to tell me, stay in your comfort zone. Don't do this, because I didn't feel confident at the time that it's something that I could be able to do. And boy, was I wrong. I was so completely wrong.
I'm so glad Mr. Mitchell kept going and kept pushing.
Yes, he did.
You had said no, and then he's like, okay, I'll move on
to
something else.
Right.
All your strengths and your abilities, and he knew.
Yes. Yes, exactly, Sonia. And that is actually the beauty of a mentor too, because sometimes, and I know that you do a lot of work with confidence, right? Like, if you answer a question, how confident are you? And you answer 5, somebody out here may be like, you're really a 10, you just don't know it, right? Like, you have to give yourself a chance. And so here, these 2 men were telling me, hey, you know what, you have the potential to do this, but I was feeling like a 5, maybe a 2 at the time, So you're absolutely right. People who care will understand your level, your resistance at the time, and they're not going to push you to do something you do not want to do. That's actually very important too. People who love you and who want the best for you are not going to push you to do something that you're not ready to do at the time. Like you said, they'll come back when the time is right, when you've had time to think about it. If you come back and you ask clarifying questions, they'll know, hey, you know what, maybe she's ready now. And that's another lesson that I've learned. And the times that people have pushed me, because, I was a kid, I did make not the best, decisions throughout my life. I still don't, I'm an adult, I'm still learning. But the people that did push me definitely didn't have my best interest at heart. And I think that's important for girls. Have so many forces coming at us at a time when we feel funky, maybe we have a pimple, we don't feel good about ourselves, we wear braces. And there's a lot of people out there just ready to exploit that and exploit our vulnerability. So look to people who trust. And if you don't have one, find one. And I know it's, you know, schools are great resources. That's where Mr. Mitchell was for me. And you know what, I'm sorry, I keep going off time just because there's just so much to say.
Right.
But Mr. Mitchell, he actually helped us when it came time to apply for the test to get us into school. Mr. Mitchell drove us, he prepared us. I'm pretty sure he fed us. I remember him taking me to Ruby's. That was the first time I'd ever been to Ruby's. It's like that hamburger, that 50s,
Yeah.
you know, joint. Yeah. And
Burgers in the car, in the cardboard.
yeah, no, we actually got off. We went inside. They had like a checkerboard pattern and like these,
So
you know,
fun.
candy red, you know.
But those are pivotal moments of your entire
Yes.
life. It changed the
Yes.
course of your life. And the power
Yes.
of mentorship is you
Yes.
help someone build their own self-esteem by making them feel accepted, liked, and loved. Like I've had instances when I was growing up where I needed someone else to be like, yes, you can do it. And like
Exactly.
you said, you were like, I secretly want to go, but that's not what everyone's doing. Or I do have these limited beliefs that are like blocking me off from my
Mhm.
true intuition of going, yeah, I do want this really good education on the East
Mhm.
Coast. And I
Right.
can pass the test and I can do the math portion. There's
Right.
so
And I
much,
did.
you know, there's so many thoughts. We have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And
Mhm.
that's why we like to work with girls, is because a lot of times they're negative thoughts or
Yes.
they're repeated thoughts of
Yes.
negativity. So it's like if you can really get in front of youth as a mentor, as a positive community member, and help them change that narrative, you never
Yes.
know where you're going to help them end up.
Where you can go. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so you took the SAT, and then what happened?
The PSAT. And so I can't, you know, for the life of me remember the score, but it must have been good enough to get me into school. And I think at that time, the schools were very much working on increasing their diversity and like the number of kids, especially, you know, I'm a kid from the inner city. I grew up in East Los Angeles. So they, you know, there wasn't a lot of representation. There weren't a lot of kids that looked like me, talked like me, you know, spoke different languages or were raised by a single mom. These are for the most part kids who are, you know, bred to go to these schools, and they have like really affluent parents who are doctors, lawyers, senators, presidents. You know, I went to school with, you know, the children of presidents and very famous actresses and actors. And, you know, here I was, this little kid from East LA, and I had to be thrown into like this fishbowl and compete with these people. But you know what? I ended up doing it. You know, I didn't do as well as some of the kids that again had been trained on this track their entire life. But I ended up, you know, earning honors. I graduated with honors. It wasn't like summa or cum laude, but it was honors. And I was very proud of myself. And again, with those mental handicaps that I set for myself, I'm not going to say anyone else did them, because I kept myself in that rut where like I can't do this, but somehow, some way I overcame. We took the PSAT. They got us into school. I mean, it was enough to get us accepted. We also had these we had folks come out, because again, these schools are very well resourced. So they had folks come out and interview us. And I remember the woman who came to interview us was a woman who looked like me, which is awesome, because I was like, well, if she could do it, I could do it too. She herself was a Latinx woman, with Latina, and she grew up close to where, you know, where I grew up, but not exactly in the same spot. And I remember she took us to her home. It was myself and my friend Rebecca at the time, and she drove us to her home, and we got to see what it was like, especially for me, because I grew up in a single parent household. But it was like for a family to sit together and have a meal, and they own the house they live in, because to this day my mom still doesn't own a home. My brother and I are the first in our family to own real estate, and California real estate is not cheap. So you know, that's a true honor for us, and he and I were the first to graduate from college in our family too. So it's opened up so many opportunities for me, Sonia, and to this day, like, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for my brother and it weren't for Mr. Mitchell. And you said, who circled back. He didn't, you know, he took no for an answer because he knew I wasn't ready, but he came back. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I was still in his class, because if I was a teacher, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But he came back and he circled back. And next time, you know, and it's also important that experience also taught me it's important to vet things with other people, because if you don't believe you can do it, then that's maybe where you'll stay. But again, you go to a mentor who may say, hey, you know what, totally go for it. And what's the worst they're gonna say is no, and you won't go. And guess what? You get to stay here, you get to do all the things you were doing before, but you just won't know unless you take the plunge. And I took the risk, and I went. You know, I remember like having to buy stuff, and I bought all the wrong stuff because I'd never been in the snow. It doesn't support it very much. I ended up taking a wool coat when I should have taken a snow ski jacket for, it was all kinds
You're
of
like, I'm from California.
yes. I'm like, we don't do that. What are duck boots?
Gloves.
Duck boots, like everything now is so fashionable, but then it was like the ugly, like brown and blue duck boots. But I had to like do all that, and it was very much a culture shock. Um, on so many levels. Like they didn't have tortillas that I was, grew up eating in Exeter, New Hampshire. That's where I went to school. I went to Phillips Exeter Academy. It actually turned out to be a very wonderful experience. Mr. Mitchell would check in with us. He would send us letters. So that was before email and before, Instagram and Insta chat or whatever they're called. But we would write each other. There was, written correspondence. Mm-hmm. Also why I believe in the power of writing, because that's how I was, reared, and it helped me process the things that I was going through in a way that maybe typing just can't. So we interacted for a few more years up until, sadly we lost touch, but I did keep in touch with him throughout that, boarding school experience. He was very supportive. And I think, I wish if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have maintained that relationship with him. Because he literally by just connecting with me and he had nothing to gain from it. It's not like I ever gave him money. I didn't do anything for his child or his wife or what have you, but he did something priceless for me. It's like, how do you thank someone for that? But you know what? Just do it in any way you can. Send a thank you card, or just being in the person's life, or taking an interest in their children or their family or what they're going through. Sometimes that's the best way of saying thank you, just being there for someone who has been there for you. So to this,
and look how it came full circle. Now you're an advocate for women and girls.
Yes,
like, it's like it literally did come full circle, and now you're helping people's lives. Mm-hmm. So you continued your education, right? You went to Berkeley.
Yes, I
another successful milestone. Everyone wants to go to, and that's another huge successful thing is like you put your education first.
Yes, and I remember the way I learned about Berkeley. I must have been like 8 years old, 6 years old. I can't remember. Somebody gave me a sweatshirt. It was a white sweatshirt with the Berkeley seal, and I had no clue what it was. It was like a hideous sweatshirt, but I put it on because, the one day that it did rain in California, I wore it. But it was, the CO reads the University of California, and it doesn't say Berkeley because Berkeley was like the original UC school. So, and it had the established date and all that. And I was like, wow, Berkeley. And that was in my brain from that time. So I always knew that I had a connection to Berkeley. And I kid you not, like, it's amazing, like you put in your head, all the negative influences out there, the positive ones can have just as much impact. So for me, it was a sweatshirt. Nobody talked about the school. And so what ended up happening is over the years, I started learning more and more about Berkeley and the civil rights movement, led by, I want to say, I can't remember for the life of me his name now, but Mario Stavio, I think his name was. Anyway, but you might want to edit that out. But student-led civil rights movement, and we had at Berkeley in Sproul Plaza this circle that is like this circle. I guess it's like a protected circle where you can say and do whatever you want in that little circle, and it's pretty much like an independent zone. Like, you couldn't be arrested if you sat on there or skied on or whatever. And so things like that were very important to me. So advocacy has always been great. It's just something that I think is in my blood. It's a natural calling for me. So when I learned about Berkeley and how momentous it was in leading the charge for civil rights, and a lot of the student-led movements that you hear about or see about in all those movies that show a glimpse of like the 60s and the 70s, Berkeley pops up in a lot of that conversation. And so I really identified with that, and I was like, that's where I want to go to school. And so boarding school, they pretty much train us to apply to different schools, and they teach us to categorize and to place schools in a hierarchy. So you have like the schools that you're most likely not to get into, because again, you have to reach for that, right? You'll always have to reach for what you think you cannot accomplish. And then we had like our safety schools, and then the schools that you're in the middle. So Berkeley was like my middle. It wasn't like for sure I'd get in. There were schools on that list that I did get into because it was assured that I would, and I did, thankfully. But Berkeley was really my goal. It was the school that I may likely get into, and I did. And it was an interesting experience. And having gone through boarding school, it was a lot easier for me academic wise to keep up, because I'm honestly, the boarding school experience was probably the best that money could pay for. And again, that's a privilege that I have, because now I'm able to pass on, those lessons to my own kids. I have two boys, 11 and 4. And that's something that, somebody who didn't have that boarding school experience wouldn't be able to pass on to their kids. But let me tell you, when it comes to my kids in care, my girls, everything that I've learned, whether they want to hear it or not, they're going to learn it from me, because I think it's my way of paying forward. Like, there may be a girl like me who may want to go to these schools, but if nobody talks to them about it, or they don't know about it, how are they going to know? How are they going to end up there if you don't even know that that world exists? And it really is a world unto its own.
It really is. It's like if you pull up your Instagram and then you go to a stranger on the street and pull up theirs, it's totally
Yes.
different information.
Yes.
And that's why at Girl Powerful, we always want to do, if we have a paid program, we always want to give back to somebody else, because we want
Yes.
the same exact information in social and emotional
Yes.
learning to be taught to
Absolutely.
all girls, because
Yes.
it's not fair. It's wild how some news
Right.
and some information like self-care, self-love, you think it's everywhere in LA, and like everyone knows about wellness and how to fuel your body. It's like you don't even have access to good food, healthy food. But you think like Coke and a bag of chips is normal because it's at 7-Eleven and that's what you have access to.
Right.
So I applaud
places.
you and for teaching and telling the girls, about the world that's out there, because they can achieve it if they stick to and be determined to like change what they, and it's so important to I know it's very, very hard, but to have people in their life that stay in their life to tell them like what's happening and what's going on right now isn't going to define the rest of your life. This is temporary. And I know there's so much pain and there's so much healing to happen, but just knowing that like your path can change. There's going to be good people out there who are going to root you on. You can build a social support system. Like I believe in you. There's, I'm just glad you exist. Honestly, Carla.
Right. You actually said something, and I'm sorry to cut you off because I'm so excited. There's just so much I want to share, but you said something very important to me right now. I think you said, because it spoke to me of girls in care. For all of you, for any of you out there who are in foster care or run the risk of, being in foster care, like I was literally one phone call away from being in foster care. I didn't mention that at the time that Mr. Mitchell reached out to me, I was running with the gang. I was making bad choices. School was always my thing though. Like I loved school. I did ditch, like I said, I made some, bad decisions along the way and I regret it now, but I learned from that experience. But there's so many dangers that are out there if you're not in school with people who, who are protecting you. Like, people at ditching parties are not looking out for you. They're looking out to a good time, and and they don't care about you, your body. When you say no, here, have a drink, and then you're in control of your senses or what happens to you. So those people are looking out for you. Stay in school. Like really, that really is the best advice. And so I made some, not so great decisions along the way, but for the grace of God, by the grace of, there was somebody always looking out for me. And I think inside I just had like this inner sense, like a street sense that, again, having made bad decisions, but I also had mentors. I had people who were looking out for me, like my brother, like he, I don't feel the loss of, and I can't say this for every girl out there, but I didn't feel the loss of not having my dad, but that's because I had my brother. My brother was something that could have gone, and I mean, okay, I have to give credit to my stepfather because I do thankfully have a stepfather, but he was never like really active. And there's some great stepfathers out there, right? Step up and they, take the charge and they take the kids to, softball and they help with homework. My stepfather wasn't like that, different needs. Like my mom and my stepdad were both, hard workers. And so they were out of the house all the time working. And so again, that's, but I still consider myself a single child because I'm sorry, the child of a single mother, because it was really my mom who catered to all of our needs. Like my stepdad was, there for her, but not for the kids, I don't know if that makes sense.
Again, I'm really glad I'm working with the girls coming up in
Yes.
weeks, because like we have a podcast, the Girl Powerful podcast, and women have been coming on and they've been sharing things that have happened in their childhood. And they're like, I've never told anyone that in my entire life. And these are like media personalities, TV personalities. And what I like internally have processed is that women and girls, we are so vulnerable. And there's always a moment where we find out in our teenage years or younger that we are vulnerable and the world isn't so nice. And we have to protect ourselves and we have to protect each other.
Yeah.
So that's why, like Teddy and I, my sister and co-founder, created Girl Powerful, because if you are able to at a young age celebrate your strengths, know reasons why you love yourself, have self-worth, build that up, you're less likely to, like, from the hours of after school from 3 to 6, turn to drugs, turn to alcohol, bad boyfriends, bad partners, or actually put up a boundary and stand up for yourself.
Absolutely.
So, even just having these conversations and having people in your life, like repeating them, it's going to be ingrained in you.
Yes.
And I hope that the girls love it, and their confidence will be sparked, and they'll be able to be like, this feels good to know how to manage my feelings and share my feelings and have someone just listen, and share.
And it being a safe place to do so.
Right.
So I'm sorry, because I went off on a tangent, but I
so did I.
It happens when you're, honestly, your passion shows. And I'm so grateful that you guys are here and that you formed, this awesome nonprofit organization that really focuses on girl empowerment, because that's something that I wish I had coming up and I didn't. But I definitely see the value of it, because I was this kid. I was a kid that I'm talking to, now. But especially for girls in care, you said something earlier, Sonia, about it not being like, it not defining your experience, is not defining you or not limiting you. And I always tell, my kids, especially my girls, when I see them, that it shouldn't be like a scarlet letter. And, there's, I don't want to go into what the scarlet letter means, but it's essentially like, somebody would have like an A, written on their clothing or their face. I can't recall now, but and it was a way to identify you, right? So I always tell my girls that foster care shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be the scarlet letter that defines you, or that when people look at you walking down the street, they'll say, oh, that's a foster kid. I can tell because X, Y, or Z, or because there's a stereotype, or some kind of discriminatory just facet that they're like, okay, well, this kid looks like this, or this kid is acting like that, or this kid is saying that, or they're using this language, or they're in this home, or they're wearing these clothes, and so they must be this. Like you said, Tanya, you don't have control over that sometimes. You have no control over what decisions your parents make, or what happens to you in life. Sometimes you're a child, you're the victim. You get thrown into this situation. I honestly, like, my foster girls are probably like the strongest human beings in the world, because you have to deal with being pulled from your home, however good, bad, ugly, beautiful, however that home is. You get to be in a stranger's home overnight. No one prepares you for that. You sleep in a bed that maybe you're allergic to, maybe a bed that's too hard, too soft. Maybe there's maybe the book that you like, or the stuffed animal that you have been sleeping, or that has been comforting you for years, is no longer there. And you have to get used to all these people. Like, it takes a long time for people to trust, to develop trust. Maybe not so long, depending on the relationship. Like you and I click, girl, right away. But because it's Girl Powerful. But it's really hard for our girls. And then sometimes they don't wind up in the same schools. So now you have to get used to a whole new set of teachers. How are you going to get to school? What are you going to wear? Are they going to make fun of me? Am I going to fit in? Am I going to find somebody that likes me? Am I going to find a teacher I can trust? What about my grades? What about the flute, that I left behind that they're going to charge me for? What about my lessons? What about, my basketball, camp at the park that I'm leaving? Like, you essentially are getting pulled out of your life. And you're being put in a situation that is completely new. And let me tell you, you're doing this at birth, at 2, at 4, at 6, at 8, at 10, at 12. So sometimes at 17 too. And there's some adults that couldn't deal with what you deal with. So to every foster youth out there, it is so true. Foster care is not going to define you. It's not the end of your story. It's something that happened to you.
You're a survivor.
You are so
Yeah.
strong and you're beautiful, and you have been through a life experience or multiple life experiences that adults like myself probably couldn't have handled as well as you have and as well as you are. And you are so special and you mean just as much as anybody else.
Right.
And don't let anybody ever tell you that you don't, because it's complete nonsense.
Right.
So that,
And
like,
it's so
Foster Girls to
horrible
me,
because it's literally the lottery of birth. Like you did nothing wrong.
nothing
This is
wrong.
just how the cards were played.
Yes.
But you are a survivor and it isn't your story. And someone gave me really good advice just last night, which is resonating with this, is to tell the girls is that you tell people who you are.
Yes.
So, you know, you go to college, you get a job, you know, explore, like you go travel, do whatever you want to do. But when you have conversations with people,
Yes.
heal from that and move on. And you tell people, I'm strong,
Right.
I'm smart, I'm a scientist,
Yes.
I'm a gymnast, I am all these things. I am
Yes.
not a foster youth anymore.
Right.
That doesn't have to be part of your story. You tell
No.
them who you are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes. Empowering because you define yourself. You set your own identity.
Yes.
So
Yes. Well, Carla, I love you and I love that you promote child safety and strength.
I could talk to you for like 24 hours straight.
I know, but I had to when we talked. I was like, I have to just talk to Carla online and share your story and the power of mentorship and, you know, how strong of an advocate you are for women and girls. Thank you for your work. And thank you for partnering with us. We are so blessed and lucky and honored, and can't wait to keep empowering girls.
Thank you, Sonia and Teddy. Because honestly, as much as this work is in my heart, I couldn't do it, or I couldn't have gotten as far without you guys. Because you have a system in place. You have something that already works.
Yeah.
And to bring it to my girls is just honestly, the honor is all mine. And just thank you for being so accommodating and for thinking of my girls and willing to come to us. So on behalf of them, thank you. Thank you, Girl Powerful.
Yeah. I know anybody listening is like, we're always like, use us as a resource. Use us for after school enrichment. Use us for workshops. We are here and we want to help. And so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And then really quick, Carla, I want to take a picture.
Oh, goodness.
For the screen thing. I'm going to stop recording.